Remember, this was once his one-time closest political partner he's talking about. But the question now is this Pence attempting to maybe be on the top of a ticket in 2024? I want to bring in our Power political team for their take. Former Ohio State Senator Nina Turner, who co-chaired Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, and Scott Jennings, former advisor, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. I'm glad to have you both here, especially on the eve of election night in America, as we know it so well. Let me start with you, Scott, on this, because did it surprise you that the former vice president has essentially extended that 10-foot pole and said, look, I'm for Kemp even before it was cool?
No, I'm not surprised at Mike Pence's engagement here because in a lot of ways, what Brian Kemp is doing in Georgia is blazing the trail that Mike Pence himself wants to go down in 2024. You have two politicians here that, at least in some ways, owe their national political prominence to Donald Trump. You know, Kemp came to power during the Trump years and was endorsed by Donald Trump. Pence obviously joined the Trump ticket. But both of them broke with Donald Trump after the 2020 election. So if Brian Kemp can pull this off in Georgia and be authentic and be conservative and be that kind of a Republican and win a primary and then beat the Stacey Abrams team in November, that is exactly the argument Mike Pence is going to try to make to national Republicans all over the country in 2024. So it makes a lot of sense for Pence to be there. And honestly, if Kemp pulls this off, that's exactly the blueprint that people like Mike Pence are going to need to follow if they want to challenge Trump in the next presidential election.
You know what? The moral equivalent of saying that voter turnout diffuses or disproves voter suppression is like saying that more people getting in the water means there are no longer any sharks. Those two things are just not true. And we know that voter suppression is alive and well in Georgia, and we're going to continue to fight back.
What do you make of that, Scott, in terms of the fact that she's pointing out the idea, look, you can't very well say because people are turning out that there were not things that were going wrong in legislation. What's your retort?
Well, I mean, the numbers, the data, I mean, what's happening on the ground? You have people voting in droves in both parties. To my knowledge, no one is dying of thirst, which was the main promise, that people were going to not be able to get water. That's a lie. I'm reading account after account of people who are saying,
well,
wow,
on,
I had no idea how easy it was to vote.
One thing, excuse me, you laugh about that point, but that was one of the controversial aspects of this is early voting we're talking about, people before having to stand in line. And so that point, I get why that's controversial and why there's a little bit of humor that you're trying to display. But in terms of the actual notion of why people turned out, do you really think that they turned out because in spite of or because of the legislation?
I don't think the legislation is causing people to turn out or not to turn out. The issue with the legislation, we spent months and months and months hearing that people were going to be suppressed, people were going to be kept from the polls, people were going to be turned away, and it was all a huge lie. This law has made it easy for people to vote in both parties. You have Republicans and Democrats turning out in droves. And by the way, I suspect we're going to have really high turnout in November as well. So everybody who wanted the law, Brian Kemp included, have been proven right, and everybody who said it was a disaster have been proven wrong.
Nina, what's your reaction to that?